yesterday was your sentencing. Did you expect, was it 8 years? Did you expect 8 years?
You know, I was hopeful. The count that I pled guilty to carried anywhere from 0 to 20 years. And so I think there was a part of me that was hopeful that I could maybe be released on probation due to my record with the probation office, due to my commitment to service in my community, due to many of the supportive letters that were written on my behalf to the judge. But obviously I had to process the reality of a potential 20-year sentence also. I knew that my sentencing guidelines were pretty steep. And so I was definitely prepared to be taken into custody yesterday, and I was prepared to be potentially facing up to 15 years. So I'm here today, and I'm still out, and I'm feeling strong in spirit, and ready to move on to the next phase of my life.
So what comes next? When do you go to jail? Where will you go?
Yeah, I don't actually know the answer to that question. I know I met with the marshal after sentencing, and they will be sending me a letter and my lawyers a letter here in the next couple of weeks with my assignment, where and when to report.
Would this normally happen sooner? Is anything delayed because of COVID?
I would say that probably my overall case, in my case, there were many delays because of COVID, but I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So overall, kind of just let's start from the beginning of your activism regarding the Dakota Access Pipeline. When did you start? What took place, and just kind of go from there.
Great, yeah. Actually, I'd been. I would have to say that it started actually with my connection with water. I grew up here in rural Iowa, and grew up on the rivers a lot, was deeply connected to the peace and joy and beauty that the river provided, particularly the Raccoon River. Grew up there swimming a lot, and I think I've carried that love with me all of my life, and that respect for Mother Earth. And I've also witnessed the desecration and the pollution that that has occurred in my lifetime over the last couple of decades. And so when I started hearing about the pipeline, the message from the Indigenous-led movement, which is water is life, really resonated deeply with me and in my spirit and in my heart. And essentially the first way that I got plugged in was I supported a Lakota youth run, Lakota, Dakota, and ran with the youths to DC. And so that was a really enlightening and inspirational time for me to learn about a different culture, a different tradition, and a different really way in which to approach the world, which is understanding that we're all connected, all beings are connected. And I think, I think that really taught me a lot about what to prioritize in life, and it helped me reconnect with that little child within me that just loved the water so much. And as I looked around at our condition of our water in Iowa, I realized we don't have much more to stake to risk here in Iowa. And so I grew very concerned that the Dakota Access Pipeline would be traveling through this region.
So you grew up in, you said rural Iowa, in Des Moines or outside?
I grew up actually in Dallas County.
Okay, Dallas County. When you think of Iowans, I grew up in Iowa too, maybe the first thing, you don't generally think of Iowans are environmentalists, Iowans are super connected with nature. It's not that we're not. What set you apart? What do you think in your own spirit, I guess, facilitated that deeper connection with nature and with water?
That's a really great question, because I think that's kind of like the core of like what's motivating me. As a very young child, I would go to the river for peace, for solace, for healing. I remember at that time you could swim in the water without having to be concerned about any kind of like, you know, health consequences. And I remember just like, even as a young child, just plunging underneath that water and like kind of like plugging my nose. And then all you could just hear and feel and see was like this life around me. And then you'd kind of go back into like normal society, back into the classrooms, back into like your peer groups and stuff. But I think there was something very real about that moment that I didn't really experience in other relationships in my life that I clung onto and like returned to as an adult. And when I returned to the water as an adult, something very tragic and dramatic had changed with the Raccoon River. And we know now a lot of like industry, corporate ag has polluted. The quality of water has seriously diminished. And I grieve that. I grieve that not just for myself, but for the young people coming up behind me, for the young people now who've never even experienced that moment, those moments that I experienced as a child, connected with the river. I wouldn't recommend anybody get in the Raccoon River right now, nor the Des Moines. And I think that is really a motivating factor for me. And I think I will grieve until we can all like rejoice in that space again someday.
So because water is so like intertwined with your being and your spirit, did it almost feel personal when you heard about the Dakota Access Pipeline being built through Iowa?
It was very personal. It was very personal, and it came from a place of grief and desperation. We can't really stand the chance of an oil spill in Des Moines. And these are not like theoretical things that might happen. So the Bakken system leaked 8 times in 2017, resulting in the spilling of over 5,000 gallons of crude oil into our nation's natural resources. So these are not just like things that might happen. These are things that did happen. And one of those leaks did happen in Iowa. It was contained rather quickly here in Iowa, but not in Tennessee. And so we're just like witnessing these industries destroying life around us, and for what? You know, for what? And I think I just need to remain steadfast in my belief that we need to take actions of courage, all of us, for whatever that means for each of us, because it is different for each of us. We are each unique, and we each bring something unique to the world, and whatever that is, we really need to start reconnecting with ourselves, with others, and with our earth and water, to figure out what it is moving forward that we need to do to heal the planet.
You still feel some of that desperation, maybe even now, right? I see, like, even, you know, I can tell it's still.
Yeah, the oil is still flowing in that pipe. That's a huge concern to me, given Energy Transfer Partners' record with the oil spills, and I think it will continue to be a concern for me and for many, many others until that pipeline is shut down. And we're really kind of hopeful that the Biden administration and more awareness around climate change issues and more awareness around water conservation and protection would help to limit the damage, at least limit the damage that these big industries are doing, and time will tell, I suppose.
So out of this feeling of deep personal connection and desperation, what did you do? What did you admit to doing?
Right. So in one sense, I'm really concerned that way that my actions are being interpreted are violent or even radical in some sense, because essentially all I did was I observed the construction crew of the Dakota Access Pipeline, and I witnessed as they were constructing the pipeline, I witnessed them welding two pipes together to create the pipeline, and all I did was go get a welder and weld them apart. Essentially, that's all I did, and I'm not sure how that's being spun as violent, and certainly not domestic terrorism, especially when the people who are constructing the pipeline are the people who are ultimately contributing to the desecration of the earth.
When, devil's advocate, somebody goes, well, sure, you got to weld it to unweld it, but, that includes, fire and whatever, welder, I'm not a welder, but and not to do that, and it's not against the law, so how could it not be seen as radical kind of thing? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think that's where the courage, and then that's where being really grounded in what is right comes into play. And it wasn't an easy thing to do. It wasn't an easy decision to make. I discerned it at length, knowing that it could potentially alienate me from communities and even from the movement itself. And I really had to make some calculated choices, and they were very prayerful and they were very thoughtful. And the conclusion that I made was that in my heart, this was the right thing to do. In my heart, this is not violent. In my heart, the laws that protect this pipeline are the laws that are violent.
When your heart does not align with the law, something that we probably all face in our lives, we have our reasons for wanting to do things, but they may or may not, be legal in the legal system. Then what? Are the consequences at the forefront of your mind? You said it was prayerful and that you thought some of these things out. So does that mean that you knew kind of what could have happened?
Yeah, of course. I think that's a really important part of my story. Also, I thank you for asking that, because I entered the valve site multiple times and multiple locations on multiple days. And each time there was a process of preparation for that, knowing full well what the legal consequences were. Working through that fear, sitting with it, and then coming out the other side saying, no, this is the right thing for me to do right now. Particularly because I had attended all of the, IU Utility Board meetings, and I'd exercised and employed all conventional means to address this issue and make the public's voice heard. And I think part of the desperation came from that, because we're taught as young American children that these are the things you do to affect change in the world, and these are the things that our government officials do to reflect the wishes of the public. And to see the failure in that system was really disheartening. And I think that ultimately that led me to come to some decisions on my own.
So now, are you fearful? Are you fearful of all those years, the time lost, and things like that in jail? Are there things you're afraid of losing? And what are they?
Mm-hmm. I would say none of it is time lost. I think that there's purpose and meaning wherever we are in our lives. So. And I've come to that conclusion through this journey. I've had to reach that conclusion. This process has gone on for over 4 years now, just kind of waiting for what happened yesterday, or some version of what happened yesterday. And so I've had to really dig down deep inside to come to the understanding that wherever I am, I will do good. I will be good. I will be of service, and regardless of what like maybe dominant culture thinks, there is community in prison. And I will be that community. I will be a member of that community. And I think that just being resolved with who I am are the things that carry you through the challenges in life. And, you know, there are many who have come before me who have spent time in prison for their convictions and spent time in prison and really affected change in this nation and in the world. And who knows what I may contribute someday to making this world a better place.
How would you describe yourself as a person, as a community member? How would people describe Jessica?
I'm pretty enthusiastic. I'm pretty energetic. I like to sing. I like to dance. I'm pretty joyful most of the time. We all have our shadow side, but I would say that I've grown so much in the last few years with so many mentors and so many elders surrounding me with love and prayer. And I think that that's really taught me also how to really serve others and be there for others just by learning from the way they've helped me. And so I think that one of the things and one of the gifts that I really bring to community life is being a good advocate and being there for people, even when others aren't.
So it's just so interesting. How do you sit with mentally, like on paper? On paper, you're a domestic terrorist, right?
Right.
How does that sit with you mentally? Knowing you describe yourself as a joyful person, a community advocate. How do you reckon with that?
Yeah, I'm pretty perplexed by that. And I'm very well convinced that I am not a terrorist. And yeah, I'm a little confused as to how like this came to be, particularly when the actions that I took were against a private industry, not against any public office, any public official. There seems to be a real disconnect in the way that my sentencing came down from my perspective. And the judge was very clear that she was sentencing me harshly so as to make it a deterrent from others to make similar stands. And so in that sense, I guess if that's your goal, then I guess what she did made sense, you know. At the same time, I have 14 days to appeal, and we will be appealing, and we feel pretty optimistic that the terrorism enhancement could get overturned.
Which could mean what for your sentence?
Right, a drastic reduction. And so essentially, like, without the terrorism enhancements, I would probably be looking at like 2 years. And so essentially by the time the appeal went through, I could be released. I mean, like, that me and my lawyers are optimistic about that possibility.
Great. You want to give 2 shout-outs?
Just quickly, is there anything you do differently now? And look at.
Yeah, look at me
sorry.
when you answer.
At
Yeah.
Eva when you answer, but so that we're consistent.
Yeah. Would you do it? Would you do it again?
Would you do it again, or would you do anything differently?
I think it's impossible in any human journey to say you wouldn't do things differently. It's been quite the journey. It's been a beautiful, messy journey. And I've tried to really show up at every point in the best way that I can. But of course, I'm human and I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect, and we're just kind of all muddling our way through this thing called life. But so of course, there are things I would do differently. But at the same time, I think just like any human journey, I can't imagine having done it differently, because I conducted myself with integrity, the most integrity that I had at every stage of this journey. I was honest. You can't go wrong there. You can't never go wrong with being honest. You know what I mean? I think there are times when I was like, shoot, why did I claim responsibility? You know, I shouldn't have claimed responsibility for these actions. They didn't have any evidence to hold against me, but those aren't the things that keep you up at night, though, right? Those aren't the things that keep you up. Being honest, I can sleep still, being honest, so.